Hi, this lesson in e-commerce is about the very important subjects of ethical behavior, social responsibility, political consequences within e-commerce from both the seller as well as the provider and governing bodies surrounding regulatory as well as organizations. So understanding the breadth and depth of various political and ethical issues. The internet, just like any other social phenomenon and technologies, can enable new crimes. It can affect the environment with which we live. It can also threaten social values. So, cyber crime, cyber fraud, identity theft are, in the news media, very big areas. Hacking, phishing, but also ways that affect the environment and social values, pornography, fraud. So the costs and benefits of using the internet and e-commerce must be carefully considered, especially when you get into some of these gray areas of new disruptive technologies where there's might be no laws or precedents or cultural guidelines. You have the universe of many users that are just coming online versus early adopters. The newer users or the newbies may be less familiar with protocol and the way things are handled in terms of protecting rights of information and individuals. But a lot of these can be broken down, and we'll go into that in the first section of this lesson. So issues raised by the internet and e-commerce can be viewed at an individual level, at a societal level, as well as political level. And there are basically four major categories of issues that you need to know about for this class, which are information rights, number one, property rights, intellectual property rights, number two, governance in how behavior is governed on the internet and e-commerce, and then public safety and welfare issues. So this is a nice chart to kind of summarize political issues, social issues, ethical issues, straddle between information rights and property rights, and then public safety and governance down at the personal level, individual society and the political bodies. So the moral dimensions of the internet are described aptly in this graphic. So basic ethical concepts are very similar to all forms of society. You have your ethical concepts, principles of right and wrong, and courses of action, principles and concepts of responsibility, accountability, liability, and laws, allowing people to recover for damages, for people to be accountable and responsible for their actions. And then there's the due process or governing portion. Laws, if the laws are understood, if they need to be clarified, if new laws to be put in place, and the ability to appeal to higher authorities to ensure laws are applied correctly, laws at a local level, national level, global level. So looking at ethical dilemmas and looking at a process for analyzing them, here are some steps that help, and think about them when you are running your e-commerce business. Identify and clearly describe the facts of the situation of the ethical dilemma. Define the conflict or dilemma and identify the values and the high order values, principles involved. Also identify the stakeholders who's perceived to be at harm, at fault, who are the governing bodies that would be involved, the legal bodies that may or may not be involved, who are the people that could assist or help you with appeal to be involved. Identify the options that you can reasonably take. So what are known options that you can take? Identify potential consequences of your pursuing those options. So let's go into a little bit more detail on those. If you look at the golden rule, this is a great principle. Again, online, offline, internet, e-commerce. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So very direct, very well understood. Universalism is an interesting principle also. If an action cannot be right for all situations, then it may not be right for any specific situation. So Immanuel Kant, categorical imperative. Ask yourself, if we adopted this rule in every case, could the organization society survive? So a universal principle. The slippery slope. If the action cannot be taken repeatedly, then it's not right to take it at all. And that's Descartes' principle from the philosopher Descartes. An action may appear to work in one instance to solve a problem, but then if repeated, would result in a negative outcome, thus the slippery slope. The rule might be stated as once started down a slippery path, you might not be able to stop. So that has to be looked at. Again, you'll probably recognize some of this terminology from legal terminology. A collective utilitarian principle takes the idea that if you take action that achieves the greater value for all society, this rule assumes that you can prioritize values and rank them in order and understand the consequences of various courses of action. So hard to do, but definitely an approach or a principle. A risk aversion principle is to take action that is the least common denominator, produces the least amount of harm or the least potential cost. Some actions would have extremely high failure costs, a very low probability, example, building a nuclear generator facility in an urban area, or extremely high failure costs with moderate probability, speeding and automobile accidents. So you avoid the high failure cost actions and choose those actions whose consequences would not be catastrophic, even if there was a failure. So that's another principle. No free lunch assumes that virtually all tangible and intangible objects are owned by someone else unless there is some specific declaration otherwise. There is no free lunch. If someone else has created what someone else has created is useful to you, it has value, and therefore you should assume that the creator wants some compensation for this. So think about that, especially in these free and freemium models. The New York Times test is a perfect information rule. Assume the results of your decision on a matter will be the subject of a lead article in the New York Times the next day. So if in fact you want that to be the case, then it's a principle you might want to pursue. But if you don't want those headlines that could be potentially damaging, then you might have second thoughts. The social conduct rule is another ethical principle. Would you like to live in a society where the principle you are supporting would become an organizing principle of the entire society? So think about that in the greater good point of view.